I'd like to start with a reality check. The truth is, almost all of us, at some point in our lives, will be touched by crime. Before we can appreciate the importance of how we think and respond to crime and those affected, it's really important to debunk the myth that if people are wise, moral, watchful, they'll somehow escape. And those victimized are responsible for their fate. Harmful falsehoods. Domestic violence honors no sanctuary. It wanders across lines of culture, economics, race, religion, nationality, gender, sexual orientation. It simply doesn't discriminate. 32 years ago, I entered into a marriage, and within days the abuse began. My husband told me I was fat and ugly, and that I should be grateful to him for marrying me. Over the course of the marriage, I rode a roller coaster of mental and physical abuse, with calls to the police, separations, protection from abuse orders. My husband achieved every abuser's goal, and that was to control me and isolate me from my family and friends. They didn't know about the abuse. I was too humiliated to tell them that I had been raped by my husband, or that I had to sleep at night with a surveillance camera pointed at me because he believed I was letting men in through the bedroom window. If he would go out at night, he'd put a bar on my car's steering wheel so I couldn't drive. If I was late coming home from work, I'd be forced to undress and endure a full body inspection. He told me repeatedly I was a worthless human being, a horrible mother, and that no man would ever want me. There are many reasons why women don't leave. I can only share mine. First, we had two beautiful children, Jennifer and David. My husband was self-employed, making a six-figure salary. We lived in a nice home in a safe neighborhood. The school was within walking distance. My salary at the time was in the $20,000 range, and I worried if I was to leave, how would I ever make ends meet? So I told myself, as long as he was only hurting me and not the kids, I could hang in there a little longer till they were a little older and out of daycare. Then somehow I would manage. In the 9th year of our marriage, my husband tried to kill me in a fit of rage. The light finally went on. I knew in that moment that I wasn't going to make it till the kids were older, where I could care for them and support them on my own. The day I made that decision, it felt like several cinder blocks had been removed from my shoulders. The weeks and months that followed, extremely difficult, with divorce, property, child support, custody proceedings, but it was still so much easier than having him under the same roof. And while I didn't want to keep Jen and Dave from their father, because of his violent tendencies, I did want their time together to be supervised. To this day, I can still hear the voice of the judge ringing in my ears. Mother, just because he hurt you doesn't mean he'll hurt the children. Sadly, supervised visitation was denied. 18 months later was Christmas Eve, 1994. My ex-husband picked Jen and Dave up for an overnight visit as part of the custody order. I was to pick them up the following morning. That never happened. Early Christmas morning, my ex-husband stabbed our beautiful children to death before plunging a knife into his own heart. On the table, next to the cookies and milk left for Santa, was a checklist, and the very last item on that checklist said, "Kill Jen and Dave." This was my ex-husband's ultimate act of revenge, my worst nightmare come true. Any parent's worst nightmare come true. It's almost 22 years, and it's still not an easy story to tell. And I'm certain not an easy story to hear either. After sharing my nightmare with you, I feel both compelled and honored to tell you a little bit more about my children. When Jen smiled, it made my heart smile. And when David smiled, my eyebrows would rise, wondering what he was up to next. With Jen, I remember how proud she was to have a baby brother and how well she took care of him. And I can remember her wrapping David up in blankets, along with all of her other baby dolls and stuffed animals, and lining them up in a row across the living room floor. I can remember going to her softball games, and she'd be doing cartwheels in the infield as the batter was swinging at the ball. With Dave, I remember pulling in the driveway from grocery shopping, and him running out, wanting to help me carry all those groceries up into the kitchen. And I'm thinking, Lynn, you are doing a good job raising this boy. And then days later, I'd find cheese curls and cookies and ice cream lined up in the back of his bedroom closet. Even as he got a little older, he was still obsessed with food. I can remember getting a call from our next door neighbor who had bought something from David as part of a school fundraising event. And she was like, Lynn, did I really just pay $15 for an empty decorator tin? I thought there was supposed to be something inside. Of course, when I questioned David, he had no idea about anything being in the can. Yeah, right. Nothing like finding a softball of melted gummy worms in an outside window well months later. And two of my favorite memories of them together, Mother's Day, they were young. They came in the house with big smiles on their faces, holding a bouquet of flowers for me. There were bulbs attached. They came from the neighbor's yard. And one last memory, it was Thanksgiving morning. We had the family coming to our home for dinner. The kids were young. They were glued to the TV set watching the parade. So I thought, what could possibly go wrong if I hop in the shower for 2 minutes? I'm in the shower, I get out of the shower, I walk in the kitchen, I open the refrigerator door. The cheesecake we made for dinner now has a hole in the center. Little finger shovels. I call the kids in, they slowly walk into the kitchen. They've got cheesecake all over their face, down the front of their pajamas, and I'm like, David, Matthew, what is this? And he looks up at me with those big blue eyes and says, me no do. Like, what's a mom to do? You open a can of cherries, you fill the hole, you feed it to your family. Sharing memories is important. It keeps those you love alive in your heart and mind. Never be afraid to share a memory. Throughout my journey, I have often been asked about closure and healing. In my opinion, there's no such thing as closure, nor does time heal. What time will do is allow you to learn how to cope with a tragedy and figure out a way to weave it into your new life. Healing for us means that the crime and the trauma no longer controls or consumes our lives. I've also come to the realization that as a society, we don't handle any kind of death well. A violent death takes the comfort level off the scale. But let's step back and look at the bigger picture. Grief is grief, no matter who dies or how they die. What's different is the intensity and duration of the grieving process. In my mind, here's where it gets a little complicated. I think about my own experiences growing up or stories I've heard. I can hear my mom. Don't talk to Aunt Florence about Uncle Chet being gone. She's having a really hard time. Or when they put my grandmother in a nursing home, it was, you don't need to see her or remember her like that. I have a friend whose child, Kyle, died in a car accident. They don't look at pictures, they don't watch home movies. If a sibling brings up his name at the dinner table, she gets the look from her father. They act as though he never existed. When it comes to losing a loved one, sometimes I feel as though we're stuck in a Harry Potter book. Anybody willing to admit that they've read a couple Harry Potter books? Who's the man whose name could not be mentioned? Voldemort. Voldemort is like Uncle Chet, Grandma, Kyle. There's a very simple saying that there's only two things we have to do in our lifetime: pay taxes and die. We are all really good at talking, complaining about taxes. But those same voices are often muted when it comes to talking about death, our experience, how it affects us, or to simply celebrate a life. We live in a society where others shy away from their worst nightmare. If that nightmare happened to you, it could happen to me. People don't want to be reminded that such tragedies occur. And even those with the best of intentions are often out of their comfort zone. Let's face it, death is awkward, and sometimes it's just easier to avoid. I don't believe that the unwillingness is because people don't care or don't want to help. I truly believe that it's because we're not always certain what the right thing is to say or do, or we have a fear that we might hurt the person even more. For any of us who supports or interacts with someone who's lost a loved one to violence, or for that matter, any kind of death, my best advice is to remember your ABCs. Avoid cliches, be a good listener, and C, converse. Avoid cliches. For me personally, some of the well-meaning comments that were said to me by family, friends, coworkers: time heals all wounds. Didn't you see this coming? At least they were young. If they were older, you would have been more attached to them. Lynn, be thankful. You can have more kids. Everything happens for a reason. It could have been worse. You really need to try to move on and get over it. It was God's will. They're in a better place. God never gives us more than we can handle. For most, there's no comfort in any of those statements. And if a sentence is forming in our mind and it begins with the words, be thankful, or at least, we need to bite our tongue. Let's go back. It was God's will. When a pastor said that to me, I looked at him as though he was nuts. I don't think God picked Jen and Dave and said their father will stab them 10 times and then take his own life. Everything happens for a reason? No, it doesn't. Sometimes the most horrific, unimaginable things happen to good people. And sometimes life is cruel and simply doesn't make sense. And when we tell someone to move on or get over it, that's like telling a blind person to look a little closer. We really have to be careful with our choice of words. When we feel the need to say something, but we're not sure what to say, 2 words: I'm sorry. A few more words: I'm sorry this happened to you. I can't imagine what you're going through. My heart breaks for you. Or, I'm really at a loss of words, but I just want you to know that I've been thinking about you. Just a small gesture to let them know you care. Be willing to listen. If you want to support someone who's lost a loved one, the greatest comfort comes from actively listening without judgment, acknowledging their pain, their fears, and creating an atmosphere that allows that person to say or feel anything they do in that moment, allowing them to express even the most outrageous thoughts. Remember, our job isn't to fix them, nor is it to make sense out of what happened. We just need to be present, validate their feelings, be willing to feel a little awkward, and have an open and listening heart. And C, converse. If you want to, don't be afraid to talk about the person. Those remaining love to be asked what kind of person they were, to be able to share fond memories. Don't be afraid to mention their name. If you knew them personally, share a fond memory. It's not going to remind the person of their loss. Trust me, they haven't forgotten. I know it's not always easy approaching or talking to someone who's lost a loved one. My hope is that by sharing my personal story, as well as my version of the ABCs, might help make that conversation a little easier. Thank you.